Hello. Right, by necessity, and I'm probably going to say hello to you more than once on this. This video was filmed over a few weeks because, you know, stuff happens. So the last video, the clutch line came in and we started to work on the tensioner. But since then, like, a couple of weeks have elapsed because obviously life, I'm not a full-time YouTuber at the end of the day. But the aim is, if I can, try and get one out every weekend or thereabout. If I can. Might not always happen because there's not always stuff to do. So yeah, so this, just for clarity, is filmed over a few weeks, which is why it might seem just a little bit patchy in places, as normal. But that's the be all and end all of what it is. So yes, so clutch line is fitted, that's coming up. I've started working on the tensioner. I've took the rivet out and I've took the pieces out that need to be taken out. I might just put that onto this video actually. It's just literally me just grinding the rivet off. And also we've got a little 101 on how the master cylinders work for the clutch and the brake. Because, you know, some people just might not know. You might be new to bikes, you might be new to maintaining your own bike, and it's just a little heads up on how they work and why they must be kept clean, etc. So yes, that's going to be it, I think. Yeah, I think so. T-shirt with added D. But yeah, they're all good now, they're in the store. I'm going to say that again in the video because obviously I've no doubt mentioned it somewhere else. But so yeah, so that's where we are. So enjoy. Right folks, changing the clutch line, and Glenn asked what we're going to do with the idle adjust, because the idle adjust lives like this. You've got some rubber, I suppose they're anti-vibration things here that slot into the frame, and in turn one of them has a cutout, and the idle, when that's normally in there, the idle control snips in there. Now the idea I've had is that this is a split fitting by the looks of it, or that's split anyway, and it's going to sit in there. But what I thought about doing was removing this just straight down the seam, clamping it, and then boring it out, if possible, to the dimension of the new hose, so the new hose can actually run through it. It might not work like that, we might have to think of something else. So anyway, step one, bleeding the clutch. Stick a pipe on the nipple. I mean, you can just crack the banjo and let it all wazz out, but brake fluid's horrible stuff. You certainly don't want to get it on any paintwork. You don't really want to get it on yourself because it stinks. So I've just cracked the bleeder, and that's gravity bleeding at the minute because I'll just give the lever a couple of pumps, look. There you go. And now there is lots and lots of air coming out, and you'll see why in a minute, because that line now is mostly vacant, a bit like myself, because the master cylinder is empty, and you can see this hasn't been prepared, cleaned or anything like that. This is just as is, as the fluid's gone through. You see there's some black schmoo in there, and believe it or not, that is probably detritus shite from the insides of the hoses as they've degraded. It's pure black. It wouldn't surprise me if that's the rubber. Anyway, 12mm bolt fit in there, and what we've done, there'll be literally no fluid up here at all. We'll get the slightest drop, but if you're worried or anything like that, just pack a load of cloth between here and just to catch anything, because there will be a drop, guaranteed. Now people sometimes say, well, of course, sit down, stand up. Well, that muck could have come from the outside. No. As you know, this is a diaphragm. These are renewable items. These need ideally replacing, you know, when you swap out your clutch fluid and your brake fluid, because being rubber, they expand and they don't fit anymore and they don't seal. So the idea of this diaphragm is A, to seal the cylinder so no air gets in, but conversely, as their name suggests, you can see that it's sectioned, and it's sectioned so when your pads are wearing and the fluid gets lower in the sight glass at the side, to maintain the correct pressures in here, they actually go down, and sometimes when you take them out they'll look like this, and people think, oh shit, but it's normal. It's dead normal. It's doing what it should. Usually on top of the diaphragm you will have like a brace like this, similar, and that's just to support the shape of the diaphragm. Now the lid, you may notice, this master cylinder is actually a ZX10 1200, because I bought a couple of ZX10 ones and they would not bleed for love nor money. Now you can see you've got slots on there when the camera focuses. See, you've got a tiny little, that creates a tiny little hole on the outside. And sometimes, yes, if you've overfilled the master cylinder, you will get a very slight weep there as it creeps out, but it shouldn't under normal conditions, because that air hole is actually designed so there's atmospheric pressure on the top of the diaphragm regardless of what pressure's under it, and that's how the diaphragm works. Basically, it maintains, if that diaphragm is in good condition, you will maintain pressure in the master cylinder, same as a carburetor diaphragm. You know, it's the same sort of deal really. So there you go. Right, without further ado, that's now mostly bled. I'll just give it a few more pumps. We are going to get some fluid out of it, but by sort of doing the line like this, we're getting rid of most of the fluid. There will still be some in the slave cylinder, so when I crack the banjo at the bottom of the 12 cylinder, oh, that would be nice, the 12mm banjo, there will be a bit of fluid come out, because there's some sitting in the slave basically. So we'll chuck a rag under it and do it, and then we'll catch that, and then we'll feed the new line through. I'm not going to take top cowling off or anything, because you can sort of feel, I can actually feel and see, I don't know if you can see anything, but see where the line goes, and then it's just a matter of bringing it up to the master cylinder on its normal route, which by the looks of it is this thick bugger here. So we've got two ways. We can either pull it through or feed it up, well, you know, whatever's easier. So we'll crack on with it. I'll put you in the stand and I'll crack the bottom banjo.
There we go, just caught that bit that's come out of the slave. If you're reusing your original banjos, these crush washers, pennies, replace them, or what you can do is get some heat on them, heat them cherry red, and then let them cool, and they will anneal again, and you can reuse them. That's if you're in a pinch. I mean, ideally, if you get the kit that I've put the link to, you'll get all the banjos and the washers and the lot. So there you go, that's one end free. And you can see how she's made up now. Steel section, I presume it's steel, mild steel, something like that, with rubber sections at the end. And it's these rubber sections that degrade more than anything. And sometimes when you'll be bleeding your brakes or bleeding your clutch, you will see small black particles and stuff floating in the fluid, and that's basically the rubber that's degrading from the inside of the hose. I have made a bit of a mess, but I know I would hate working with hydraulic clutches and brakes, purely because it's messy, or it can be so much messier. So I'm going to crack the nut at the top and then feed it through. I'm going to leave the camera there. That was good. Didn't get a drop out the top cylinder. That's brilliant. So, sliding it through now. Something. What's in the way? Oh, I've got to get down here now and have a look. Ah, that's right. There was another rubber grommet. That's alright. So, we've took that off. Let's move the camera. So there you go. This is the master cylinder end. Rubber section. That was just stopping me from coming through. I didn't realise it was there, because normally you don't see it because it passes behind the frame. Another one. And then there's the two. There's the one with the idle in it. So what we're going to do now, I'm just going to roughly feed it up. In fact, I'm going to go from the other direction. What I'm going to do, let's take it all out. Oh, I tell you what, the framing skills are brilliant. It's going to go through that in the frame. So I think what I'm going to do is feed it through there, and hopefully catch it out there so it can be ran down there, and then we can worry about the tightening and farting later. Stick you back. That's that through. bag open as usual. There is a pigeon on the roof. Oh, that weren't me. Oh, my mistake it was. Oh, you bugger. Ah, lost the washer. Right. Rub, rub, rub. You can actually see Mr. Pigeon on the roof. You wait. What's the? He'll do a big poo now. He's probably wondering what I'm doing. He's probably wondering, I wonder if that fat bloke's got any food. Do you know what? I'm going to test fit a bolt before I do that. I'm having trouble finding the thread. It's probably not where I think it is. No, there we go. Operator error as usual. That's all too common. Right. So what we want to do is give ourselves a bit of slackage. There we go. There we go. Is he in? Typical. As soon as I turn the camera off to wipe my hands and just see where this bolt's going, find the thread. Bloody typical, that is. So anyway, what we're going to do, we're going to attach both ends, and we're going to worry about this later, because you see the original had quite a kink on it, so it might be that we don't use that with the new line, and we can put him on here with a cable tie or something like that, because that might be best. Just, you know, nip him there with a cable tie or something. There's plenty of line. That might be neater. What do you think, guys? You know, cable tie around there won't hurt. We can find somewhere else. Now that, the arm of the banjo has to sort of go that side of this tang here, because that is designed so you can actually tighten it up without it rotating. They're not going to be mega tight anyway. What I'm going to do is get the service manual and find out what the banjo bolt should be, but they're quite low. People, if you've ever stripped one, and especially one of the alley ones, you'll know it's sort of nearly there, nearly there, nearly there, and the head comes off, and hopefully, you know, you can recover what's left and just spin it out. But I don't want to do that, because that is a stainless fitting into an aluminium housing, so we'll strip the threads of the housing before we break the bolt. So we'll get the proper torque on that, but I think that's what I'm going to do, is just bring it over here. we'll see. I mean, the original routing put it really close to the engine anyway, and that can't really sit at an alternate angle. You see how this banjo is very slightly bent out. See, the original actually bent that way first, and we could do that, but that's going to put us... No, we can do that. Yeah, let's do that and see how it sits, because in theory it'll bring the hose up here a bit more. But I don't think it's going to matter. I really don't think it's going to matter. Shall I? Shan't I? Oh, decisions. Shall I? Shall I? Shall I? Shall I? Shalom. Let me have a think on that. Yeah, so I got that the other way around. I actually ended up, I struggled with the hose. There's still loads of room in this hose, but I actually took the slave out and then put the hose on and then put the slave back on, and it was a lot easier. Just saved you trying to bend the hose and get the banjo in. So that's going through its original routing up here, through the frame and up onto the master. But what I've done, I've not fully tightened that. That can move, because what I want to do now is just put the handlebars through a rotation and just make sure nothing's binding. I'm just going to rest you on the tank. I'm not sure if you'll stay there. So that's its resting position. Yeah, that's good. And obviously that's getting closer to the slave cylinder. So what you don't want to do is put everything in with the handlebars in this position, because this is its slackest position. When you fit the line, have the bars over here, because that's the tightest. But I'm quite happy with that. But the question being, so I can now actually tighten that top knot. The question being, oh god, look at the mess in here. Oh James, honestly. Right, is as Glenn was asking what to do with this boingy fella. To be quite honest, Glenn, this is going to be down to personal preference, but what I think I'm going to be doing is I will cut this line. I've got proper pipe cutters and what have you, which I've never used, so it's a good excuse. And I'm going to cut this off, because actually that'll probably just split. And I'm thinking if we pop this in the vise and possibly run a drill bit down it, look, so we can get it somewhere near the OD of this, even if we have to cable tie that block into there, it's going to be a neat solution for the idle. I mean, to be fair, the Kawasaki solution worked well. You know, they thought about supporting the solid line, which is fair enough. Interesting, one end it's a crimp fitting, and on the other end it looks like a union. So we'll see. I might have to do surgery on that later, but I can't even see where that snapped in. It's somewhere under the frame rail somewhere, but we've gone up there. It's pitch black, so without taking the tank off and what have you, I can't really see if there is a grommet for there, but we don't really need it anyway. I might take the tank off and just whack a cable tie on it, but if you whack too many, you know, I might even bore that one out so the line goes through, but and then, you know, so it sits nice. I don't know, but I shall probably do that tomorrow, because it's knocking on now. So anyway, the line's in. I shall bleed it tomorrow, because it's time for me tea, and you know, it could be fish fingers or something like that. Who knows? Who knows? So what are you having for your tea then? Come on, whack it down in the comments. Let's let's see how the old fan club lives. Now people are going to say, oh, your oil looks over full. Right, I've got the stand on a block of wood to try and get it a bit upright, because then it's just for ease of me, basically. Obviously, if you've still got your main stand and stuff, whack it on the main stand. But it is not over full, because if I put the bike actually upright, there you go, and believe it or not, it shows how gunky this engine was. You know, I showed you the clutch basket the other day, and there was the gunk on the runners for the plates. I'm going to call them about 20 different descriptive things, but that was gummed up because we don't, at the earliest, this engine actually ran properly probably 4 to 5 years ago. So this is the first clean oil it's had in it since I've had it. It's done I don't know now, a couple of 100 miles since the MOT. So it's had a couple of good runs of 80 odd miles to get up to temp. So what I'll do, I'll take it up to about 500 and I'll just drop the oil and filter again, and then you know, we've got the starter tensioner to fit and all that lot. So yeah, that'll do for now then. It might I'm starting to like this bike. I mean, this was my dream bike 30 years ago, don't get me wrong, but it's, you know, when you get a bike with a bit of a sketchy history, even though there's a massive history file that comes with this. I've never owned a bike where a previous owner has actually been as meticulous as to keep every single receipt, etc, etc, and by the looks of it didn't do a lot themselves. They entrusted it to a garage, and I've already found a couple of jobs where if I owned that garage I wouldn't have been happy with the result, but we won't name names or anything because you know, they probably don't even exist anymore. You know, a lot of independent bike shops have gone tits up over the last 30 years. So we'll see. I'm just sort of getting my head round it at the minute, that I've actually got the dream bike I wanted 30 years ago, and I'm sure some of you are screaming and shouting going, it needs a restoration, it needs to be this. Listen, if it's in my fleet, shall we say, for want of a better, it's got to work. That's the bottom line. It has to work. You know, if I put money into it, it's got to be able to drive, it's got to be able to ride. And on that kind of news, Mrs. Shed's bike is a Honda CB1 400. I do believe it's a CB1. It's an something like an RC27, whatever it is, NC27, something like that. Don't know. She's got a shoulder injury at the minute, which has been long standing, and she's having physiotherapy and all that lot for it. And at the minute, she can't actually pull the bar straight on the bike because it hurts her so much. So what we're going to be doing for a series of videos as well is we're going to be stripping the CB4 down because, you know, forks want polishing, engine wants repainting, stuff like that. Just go through it because it's been a good while, certainly before I knew Mrs. Shed, that it's ever had a good going through. When I first met her, I redid. It had an overheating problem. It wouldn't go 20 miles, you know, without overheating and stuff like this, and I ended up flushing through the coolant system, replacing the thermostat. We did a full service on it, and it's never ever overheated again. You can leave it outside running half the day and it will not boil over. So we've cured that, but it's due some attention. So there'll be a lot of future videos where we're doing some work on that. So I hope you stick around for those, because they're cracking little bikes. They're so good. They're quite high revving, and they're one of those machines where you'll go down the road on them absolutely screaming blue tits out of it, and you'll still only be doing 60, but it just sounds so much faster. But yeah, I'm starting to get to like Nibbler. I mean, properly like. I like the way he rides, I like the way they look, I like the fact that when this came out, nothing but an Apollo rocket could really touch it. So I think when the budget's there And when people start buying stuff off the store, or if you want, guys, there's a Patreon to support the channel. It doesn't buy me Chinese takeaways, it buys parts for this kind of stuff. That's what it's there for. Caliper refurbs, I'm going to get stainless lines on the front. Speedo seems to be behaving now, funnily enough. It was a bit funny first couple of rides, as it got up to like an indicated 70 or 80 on the motorway. I know it's genuinely not doing that. It would fluctuate quite wildly, the needle. I say quite wildly, 10-15 miles an hour. And I put that down to a bad cable. But when I took her out the other day, it seemed to have settled down a bit. So I don't know. I'm going to get the GPS on it and just see what the genuine speeds are. So, me waffling as usual, total rollicks. Enjoy your day, guys and girls. And we'll I don't need to film bleeding the clutch, do I? Christ. If you are having trouble, the only reason I put a ZX10 master cylinder on it is because it was actually the same part number than the ZX10 one, but I thought, well, what's the newest bike that uses the same part? And it was a ZX10, which were made until 2005. But obviously you could get newer ones in dealers that were sat on the floor and registered. So that's my master cylinder, because, let me just move you. Oh, what a great view you're getting of the shitty shed. In the master cylinder there are two holes. The big hole is the feed hole for the piston. The little hole, believe it or not, is a return. So when you do this, you're pushing fluid along, and when you return, air or fluid can come back through this. This hole here is literally like a gnat's ballsack pube. It's so thin. And what I think happens with a lot of the older master cylinders, they clog up, because obviously you get detritus in the old brake fluid, and it blocks up. And I, for two cylinders, the original and one I bought from Germany, could not for love nor money get that thing to bleed. I reverse bled it, and what ticked the box was I reverse bled it from the cylinder using a syringe from the slave cylinder, and you push the fluid up the line. You still have you still can introduce a lot of air into the line like that if you're not careful. Personally, I like to use the gravity do it as it should be done, and I've got a little mighty vac as well. But it wouldn't, there was no fluid coming into the cylinder, the master cylinder. We're here bleeding the clutch, and you know I told you about this little hole earlier. This is imperative why it's got to be clear. You can see the air coming up, look. So obviously we've still got air in the lines because I've only just started, but that is why that hole, it is imperative it has to be clear. If there's even the slightest bit of gunk in it or corrosion, which in my case, it will not bleed for love nor money. You can be there all day and you can put as much fluid through it as you want, it won't go. Imperative to bleeding, make sure there's plenty of fluid in the reservoir. That's now due for a top up. Guys, what I've done, I've separated the old line with a pipe cutter. Nice neat job. And I've just took a couple of the bungs off, and this one that holds the idle. And my idea was, it might not go too well because it's split for the most part, is that I'm going to waz a drill bit down it and just see if it'll bore it out. So we'll see how that goes. Unfortunately, I've misplaced my tripod, so I'm going to have to switch off while I do this. So what I've ended up doing, the drill bit just split this completely, so you can't really drill it. So I'll just put it back in the holder, put the line to the side, and that ain't really going to go anywhere, and I shall just put a cable tie there, and that'll do. But it works. Just in case you're wondering just how much the clutch plates move, I'm going to show you. The clutch is bled now, and it was easy peasy. So I'll just show you because I've got the side off. Right, there's your clutch plates. you go, not much is it?
Good morning. It's Saturday, or whatever, and I've just fit the clutch line on the bike, and there'll be a mishmash of me doing that, and how I ended up securing the idler for the carburetors, which I just used in the end, the old rubber, what you call it, a hose holder, and I've just laid the new line alongside it. I tried to bore it out, but it split. Anyway, I thought we'd have a quick word about master cylinders. I'm going to put it on stand. Hopefully you'll be able to see. There you go, you should be able to get a good view of the master cylinder. Now this is a brake master cylinder. Do excuse me, I'm pulling up a pew and knocking the camera. Right, basically it's just a quick 101 on how they work and why they sometimes don't bleed, especially on older bikes. But I have seen the problems that I'm going to describe in bikes as young as 3 years old, if they're used every day or used in shitty weather a lot. Excuse my French. Shit French? I don't know. Anyway, master cylinder basically has a this is the reservoir. Underneath is a chamber, a cylinder where the piston sits, and the piston is basically, it's held in place by a circlip, etc., so it can't back out and it can't come out the hose way because the diameter is smaller. So the piston, obviously on a motorcycle, this is a clutch lever, so the piston action is that way to the right, and then obviously that's forcing fluid out the end to, in this case, operate the slave cylinder. And in a brake application it'd be operating the pistons basically. But basically what you've got is, this is the reservoir, and this usually here is the absolute maximum fill line, and you have a sight window here so you can do a quick visual inspection of it. And these sight windows do get a little bit dirty and stuff like that. They are easy to replace, but even on a bike that can be a year, 2 years old, the fluid can be quite foggy. If it is, it needs changing, because brake fluid is hygroscopic, and what that means is it attracts water and retains water, and it will do that through the atmosphere. You don't actually have to expose the motorcycle, car, whatever, to rain or anything like that. It pulls the moisture out the air, so over time, regardless of how many miles you've done, etc., it will spoil. When it spoils, its boiling point lowers, and you can't compress water. So you know, if anybody's ever hydrolocked an engine, you'll know that. So also the effectiveness of the brake fluid rapidly goes off, and so if the fluid looks cloudy, or you've just bought the bike and it's like a year or 2 years or whatever, regardless of what the dealer's told you, if that fluid even looks slightly cloudy, change it. Just bleed the systems through, and then you know in your own mind you've got good fluid. Now I tend to bleed mine every year because of the climate in the UK. Basically we are, you know, at the end of the day we're a wet country. I mean, especially in places like Wales, whose chief export is rain, followed by sheep, and then followed by singers. But anyway, this is the reservoir. This sits on top typically of the piston. Nearly all master cylinders work on the same principle and function. And what you have here on the left is the feed hole. Now the feed hole, usually the piston will sit just slightly behind it, very slightly. But you'll notice on motorcycle pistons they have sort of a corkscrew pattern in them which allows fluid around them, and then you have a seal on the front of the piston and one on the rear. These are called cups, the first and secondary cups, and obviously those cups are there to seal the bore, so when fluid gets past it,
when the piston moves down the bore, you're then compressing it, which then in turn, provided you've got the air out the system, works the slave cylinder or the calipers, whatever's applicable. Now I've bored this one out, but this is a return hole. Okay, so what happens is when you, I mean, there's not a piston in this because this is actually my original ZX10 reservoir. Could not get it to bleed for love nor money, so put a ZX12 one on. This hole here usually is hair thin, and I mean hair thin. I didn't even have a wire thin enough to clean it out, and the trouble is with a used bike, these corrode up, especially if you have had moisture in the fluid. This alloy, as you can see inside here, especially near the cap, above the cap line, this is basically the diaphragm line above there, you can see the corrosion, and you can see that on year-old bikes. You know, this just happens to be 30 years old, so in reality it's not all that bad. But this is hair thin, but this is the pressure relief hole, because obviously as you push the lever in and the piston moves past the feed hole and past the relief hole, as soon as it's past the relief hole it starts to build the pressure it needs to. And then what happens when the piston comes back is that that pressure has to go somewhere to release the clutch or release the brakes, so it comes back up here. Now when you're bleeding, you should see a nice steady stream of very fine air bubbles come out here. And you know when you've got most of it out, because obviously you'll see the air bubbles in the line, but you'll also know you've got most out because when you pump the lever you'll actually get a jet of fluid out of here, which is why it's a good idea to keep the cap on when you're bleeding, because when you go like that it will spray out. So I can show a little clip of that. I actually, the clutch line that I put on, I've bled more than once, because I bled it once for sort of demonstration, and then I went back, just bled the system out fully. I just made sure it was working first, bled the system out fully, and then I cleaned the inside of the reservoir because I had black rubber deposits in here from the degradation of the hose. And that's another thing you have to work out for. If you've got black muck in here, some people think it's like brake dust or something like that. It isn't. The inside of your hose, especially if it's an older bike, say 5 years plus, the rubber actually degrades inside on such a fine scale it will get through this relief hole and start depositing crap in the master cylinder. And of course then all you're doing when you're pumping the brakes, you're putting crap back down the line. Now it sort of works a bit like a collapsed artery. If you notice your clutch getting heavy or your brakes not as good as they were, and it is, you know, a bike that's a few years old, or it's ridden in inclement weather a lot, for example high humidity, but it's mainly age that the hoses deteriorate, and that's why a lot of people put braided hoses on and then they forget about it. You know, they think, oh well, it's got braided hoses, it'll be fine. Braided hoses still usually have like a Teflon inner, something like that, and then a braid on the outside. These do still degrade, but not to the extent of the original factory rubber. So that's basically what happens, and your brake system's just the same. I mean, obviously, like I said, I've bored that hole out so you can see it. In reality, you can barely see it. I mean, you know, you really have to look well. I mean, if you're bleeding the brakes and you're pumping and you do not see anything at all come out of this, chances are it's blocked or corroded, and you need to clean it out. You know, something like even a wire from a wire brush can be too thick. You can use like a needle or something like that. The tip of a needle might just do it. You might just get away with it. And you can spray brake clean at it for as much as you like. If it's corroded, it's alloy corrosion, and you will not move it with brake cleaner. So that's just another heads up on how they work. And car master cylinders are much the same way. They're much the same way, except obviously the pedal is attached to the piston via a linkage. and it works much the same way. You have to make sure that the pressure relief hole is clear, or it will never ever bleed. Or worst case scenario, if you just bought a used bike and you think, oh, the brakes are sticking or anything like that, that's probably corroded up, and you will never ever free those calipers off, because the caliper is not the problem, it's this. So I hope that's helpful, guys, and I'll obviously I'll tag this onto the clutch line video. But yeah, I ended up replacing the master cylinder because this just wasn't working. The inside of the bore was corroded as well, so it wouldn't seal correctly. But that's just something just to watch out for, and that's just to do with the age of the bike, and the old fluid's been left in it God knows how long. We knew this bike sat for, I think it was 4 to 5 years under a tree, so it was outside. But who knows when the fluid was changed before that? It might have been 5 years before that. Who knows? But you know, the clutch is operating brilliantly now. And the ZZR 1200 master cylinder is exactly the same part number. So you know, the latest ones of them are what, 2005, 2002, something like that. So a lot newer than this one. So that's why I bought it. And if I have to replace the brake master cylinder, I'll go after a ZZR 12 one. You know, other ones are going to fit, but I tend to stick to the same manufacturer, obviously. So yeah, that will do. Enjoy your weekend, guys and girls. I'm resting me back up because I've tweaked it a little bit, and then we're still waiting for the Compton starter chain tensioner modification to arrive in the post. Ordered it 2-3 weeks ago now, whatever it was, could have been 2, I don't know, but somebody told me that the delivery window is anywhere between 4 and 9 weeks, so we're still going to be waiting for that. And obviously that's in bits, so we won't be using the ZX obviously until that's reinstalled, because, well, you know, why ask for trouble? As for the state of the other fleet, let's get you around so you can see gorgeous me. Yes, you lucky thing. State of the fleet, Rosie doing fine, absolutely doing fine. I've been using her a fair bit lately, but this last week I used the SLK, which I have not introduced to you yet, but we've had the SLK, it might even be 5 years this year. We bought him as a project, and he's nicknamed Slinky because of SLK. I name all my vehicles. I'm sure some of you do, and I'm sure a lot of you go, huh? But I always have, for about the last at least 10 years. I've named them. I was never really bothered much before that. I never named my first bike or my second bike or third bike or anything like that, because I used to get bored really easily of stuff, and if a bike I owned made its first birthday, it was pretty lucky. I mean, you know, I had an 883 Sport Stock, which would suit me now, but at the time when I was in my very early 20s, wrong bike, just wrong bike, and it was a bag of shite compared to, I'd just come off a ZXR, you know, like the cutting edge of Jap small capacity race technology at the time, onto an 883, which was a bit like a Massey Ferguson, although the first tractor I drove at 14 was a David Brown, and it wasn't as good as a David Brown. But anyway, there you go. So the SLK, we've got some work to do on that. We've got some body work to do on that, because that is the big thing with SLKs. I'm going to put you back in the holder. The holder is bolder, because I'm holding the camera. There you go. Look, oh, you're lucky. See, that was a bit more professional. Not going to happen. So the SLK, yeah, we bought it as a project anyway, because I love the underdog. I like to buy a vehicle that needs a bit of work. So, where was I? Oh yeah, I'm going to give you a quick update on the fleet. Now the fleet includes, it's not exclusive to, we've got an SLK 230 supercharged, 2001, and I quite like the underdog, and we bought him as an underdog, and he's nicknamed Slinky because of SLK. And I think this year will be 5 years since we've had him.
and we got him fully serviced, engine service, gearbox service, all that lot, by my mate Steve at Toad Speed in Inkley. When we got him, and touch wood, it's been absolutely perfect ever since. I say perfect, it comes with a caveat, obviously. That year of Mercedes, a couple of years around about the 2000s, their metalwork was diabolical. It was terrible. I mean, I thought my old MX-5 rusted, but this Merc rusted. It rusts not on a level of an MX-5. They were crap, really crap. I mean, I got an MX-5 because my brother-in-law had one for sale. He was changing his car. I had it, got it for a steal, but I didn't like it. I didn't love it. It wasn't what the hype was. A bit like, you know, when you look forward to a movie coming out and you look at the trailer and you think, my God, that is amazing. But the trailer was all the best parts of the movie, and you may as well not have bothered watching the movie. To me, the MX-5 was like that. Now, I had a Mark 2.5 1800. To be quite honest, the MGF I had before it was a far better car. And a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but I'll give my reasonings. MGF was mid-engine rear-wheel drive, and I don't care that it was based on a Metro subframe and all this lot. Doesn't matter, because those people have obviously never driven one. And yes, we're going to hear the stories. Oh, Rover K series, head gasket failure. Listen, I know of more BMWs, Mercedes, Renaults, etc. that have shit head gaskets on a regular basis than any fucking Rover ever did. That's just a fact. That MGF, I put 160,000 miles on that. No bother at all. No bother at all. The only bother I had with it was self-inflicted because I flinged it backwards through a hedge. But that was me, not the car. But mechanically wise, it never ever went wrong. In fact, the only thing that went wrong with it was I laid it up over one winter, and when I came to recommission it again, I went to start it and there was a god awful squeak followed by the sound of a auxiliary belt snapping. I think it only had one auxiliary belt for the alternator, that was it. It was electric power steering and no air conditioning or anything like that. And what had happened was the alternator had seized, and that was it. That was honestly it. Mechanically, that was it. And that was soon got going again. It's, you know, I got some a pipe wrench around the pulley and just gently wiggled it and it broke free, but obviously it had seized to the extent that the belt couldn't overcome it. But yeah, once it was done, it never gave any more bother. So yeah, great fun car, fantastic to drive. It was on hydroelastic suspension or whatever it's called, hydrostatic, whatever. And it was absolutely brilliant, really nice ride quality when the suspension was gassed up. But yeah, I mean, I went round Scotland with that. I think I took that to Scotland a couple of times, and it was brilliant because you learn to live with a smaller car. So you pack lighter, or if you miss a shed, you don't. Because the other year when we went up in the SLK, she actually drove all the way up and all the way back because she has to have the seat nearly all the way forwards. So she managed to get nearly a boot's worth of crap behind her seat as well, which meant I couldn't drive it, which is a shame. But I didn't mind being chauffeured, and she's a good driver. But yeah, but the SLK, I love it. I really love it, and people can knock it all day long, and I have all the hairdresser jokes and all this lot. And you know what, I don't care, because these are people that they probably can't have a car like that in their life. It just doesn't work. Well, for me it does, because obviously I've got the other one as well, and I've got the bike as well, so it works. But it's done sterling service, but we're going to have to do a bit of body work. We had 3/4 of it done a few years ago now, probably 3 years ago now, and we had like 3/4 of one side done, because that was, but one sill was starting to go, the rear arch was pretty bad, but they put a new quarter panel in the rear and they did it all. That's held up pretty well, but now front wings are a weak spot because they get a moisture trap right at the front where the bumper joins, and they rot out there, and you'll get little blisters on the end of the wings where a mounting bolt sits and it holds the water, and they're blown out. They are blowing out now. I mean, it's got a lovely paint blister now both sides. Wings are available, and that just might be the easiest route. Just stick a pair of wings on it, and then you know you can weatherproof the wings when you put them on. Wings that are easy to remove, fortunately, just a load of bolts. So that might be the route. We had the wheels done because the wheels were really scabby. I mean, they were awful, and a local company up in Ibstock called Jeff Folks did them. Was not cheap, but Mrs. Shed treated into those to get the wheels refurbed, and we did that. And they look fantastic considering the state that they were in. They were fantastic, but we will do a proper introductory video for the SLK, like the updates we did with Rosie. If there's any work needs doing to it, we'll start like a play series with the SLK, because they are like a four-wheel motorbike. They're as impractical sometimes, but they're also as practical as the car. It's a bit like having a Goldwing with four wheels basically, but you've got a million miles of headroom. It's a bit like being on a motorbike. You've got a million miles of headroom, you're open to the elements, you smell everything, you hear everything. It's great, and if you're in a convertible you know all about that. The other thing, Rosie, she's halfway due for the oil change, so what I always do is put an oil filter in because it's a vertical mount, you don't lose any oil, it's not messy. So for the sake of £5 for a Wix filter, I don't use Fram or anything like that. I always use a good one like Mayer or Wix, like I say, something like that. So I changed that the other day because it's halfway due. Now modern oils will go past the service intervals put into place by the manufacturers then, because it's 20, what was that? That design now is 20 years old. Oil technology's come on a fair way because that's part of my work was to develop oils. And when you get behind the scenes with oil development, you appreciate just what they can do. So I don't get into the argument of, oh, you must change your oil every 2,000 miles or 3,000 miles. It'll do fine, whatever. Do what you want to do. You won't harm anything. But I tend to stick to the manufacturers. So that is about the state of play. We're waiting for the Compton adjuster to come in, as I've said, and then we'll get on with fitting that, getting it back on the bike, and then I'm hoping to start some vlogs out on the bike, probably out on the car, but probably mainly the bike. Carl's not sure what he's going to do, whether he's going to continue doing videos with the Discovery or not, because not a lot of people watch them, but then we don't promote them. And if you tend to own a Land Rover of that age, you tend to know how to fix them, usually. So he might not be doing any more Land Rover content, and he's going to be quite busy anyway because he's got some family stuff going on, which is fine. It's fine. I think people mainly watch this because I'm a moron. But they like the bike stuff, and we've got Mrs. Shed's bike to do as well, which is a little Honda 400cc CB1 import. Now she's had that bike I think over 12 years, and it's due for a bit of a sympathetic refurb. Not concourse or anything like that, just get it nice, because she polished the wheels on it and she painted the wheels on it. Her brother got the bodywork all hydro dipped by someone who was a painter and wanted to go at hydro dipping, so they did it with her bike, and the finish isn't brilliant, to be honest. It's like a matte finish and it's bloody horrible to touch. It's revolting. We've tried to put lacquer on it and all sorts, and it just no. But we probably won't be touching the bodywork. It's mainly, my concern is I gave it a good chassis service the other year, and the frame is steel, and it's just starting to rust in a few places. So ideally I want to strip the bike down to the bare frame and just sort those problems out. I've got a sandblasting gun, or send it off to be blasted, whatever. Spend a bit of money on Pinky, because she's not had a lot of money spent on her over the years. I mean, I've known Mrs. Shed 5-6 years, something like that. Feels like longer, and I mean that in a good way, not a bad way. And basically, apart from basic servicing, and I sorted an overheating problem out, it's not really done anything. I've just had to switch the camera off because there's a lot of people coming and going today, and where this shed is on the side of the house, which is I'm going to use to do a lot of filming, and obviously where the bikes are, and we'll take the cameras there and stuff. But so people coming and going, I tend to stop the camera because they put me off. So that's the state of play. So we'll be doing a strip down playlist of the Honda. I will, as soon as I've got Nibbler back running and I can move him in and out from where he is under engine power, because I don't want to be pushing him, then we'll start on the Honda and we'll do a series on that as well. And that should be quite good, because that is basically the running gear, and the engine on that is all early CBR 600. If you need parts for it, CBR 600F all day long. The running gear, the forks, engine, and just have to turn the camera off again. I was just surrounded by idiots. Well, there's mainly one, he's next door, so it has to be uncle, but he, as you know from previous videos, he has a habit of coming past whistling and singing. It's like when you try and explain something, I'll put you off, but wouldn't change it for the world. But yeah, it's all ticking over nicely. This week was the first full week I've had at work for probably a year and a half, 18 months. So obviously, hence the start up of the channel, Shoestring Shed, because we are on an absolute shoestring budget. As you can see, wearing the shoestring hoodie, which is lovely. I really like it. All available in the store, along with stickers, t-shirts, and all that lot. And we ordered some samples, and we're really happy with them. Now I've altered the design, so it's proper. So anyway, enough about me waffling. Enjoy your weekend, and hopefully we'll get rolling again when the Compton parts come in. But I just thought I'd give you this update and with the clutch line, etc. So thanks for watching, thanks for staying there, and enjoy your weekend. But there's no crumpets. I might have to rectify that. So cheers a lot, arm in shot, and we'll hopefully see you again very, very soon. Cheers guys, bye bye.